Grand Rising. Grand Rising. Hope everyone's doing well. Hope everyone had a great day yesterday.
Peace, y'all. Grand Rising. 2212.
Grand Rising, everyone. Peace, peace.
Grand Rising, Big Hawk. Macadon 1. Brittany Davis. Alfred Jones. Everyone had a productive day yesterday. And hopefully you'll have a even better day today. So how's everyone doing? Anybody have anything interesting happen yesterday? Anything worth talking about?
Rain.
You said rain?
Yep, told you I think we get a boat and raining way too much.
We must be getting some of that rain that up here, cause it rained for about a good 6 hours yesterday. Grand Rising Free. So that was pretty much it. Grand Rising Copper Color Queen. Hope everyone's doing well.
Peace, peace.
So as some of you may be aware, as you're starting to log on, and you may notice that there may be some individuals that have received wrenches. That means you have, what do you call that?
Moderators for the page.
Thank you. I'm having a brain freeze today. And the great thing about the way that happens is the chat chooses who gets to moderate. We don't. So as you continue to come on and build with us and help and show support, and make sure we stay on code and make sure we keep our house clean, then the chat will determine that you get a wrench. So shout out to all those that's got wrenches and all those new individuals that's got wrenches. And I'm sure we will be issuing out more wrenches later. I guess that's the way you say it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that's right. And we're not doing that everybody gets an award. Wrench giving out, or we're not those. We're just,
Okay.
You get a wrench. You get a wrench. You get a wrench.
Yeah, ain't no Oprah. We ain't gonna Oprah you.
And we all got a wrench.
Anyway, let me go ahead and hit this transition so we can move forward and get started with the second part of the Cherokee Tribe Treaty, dealing with the Treaty of 29 December 1835. Yesterday we left off reading the Article 16. So I'm going to go ahead and just transition so those coming on to know exactly what we're going to be moving forward with. Give me a second.
Grand Rising Golden Home, Macadon 1.
Grand Rising, Golden Moon, Macadon 1. So we're going to be covering the Treaty of 29 December 1835, which is the Treaty of the Cherokee Tribe. Grand Rising Joshua James, hope all is well. And we're going to be having, I only want to call her a guest. Do we call her a guest, Bones?
One of our A2 members?
Yeah. Very integral part.
We say a special guest host for the day.
Special guest host. Yeah, so just for the day, huh?
I think the verdict not out yet.
Free said co-host. So yeah, we will we are pleased to announce that today you will be receiving some feminine energy that's going to be very helpful. So we want to welcome aboard our co-host who's going to be helping us read. That would be Miss Brittany Davis. So welcome, Britt.
Grand Rising, Grand Rising.
You put her.
Grand Rising. Grand Rising. Help us read good.
Oh gosh, this is gonna be fun.
Out there, well, read well.
So I'm gonna go ahead and put the link in the chat so they can follow along with this. As you know, the reason why we do this is so that people can not only have the information to refer to later, but catch anything that we may miss, and also correct anything that was misquoted. And if you know of any people that are Cherokee and belong to a tribe or have some tribal history that are Cherokee, that they can either corroborate or debunk what's in this treaty. Because we are aware that this is just one part of the story. You know, there are 3 parts of the story. We're hearing it from the United States side. There's also the Cherokee side. And then once you put those 2 stories together, you can delineate the truth. So understanding that this is only part of it, putting this information in the chat so you can follow along with it, and, you know, cooperate it, debunk it, help us make sure we stay on we stay on par and we get it right.
Especially if you're a part of any of these tribes that we're talking about, and you have, your.
Yeah, because contrary to popular belief, the tribes do have written documentation. That's how the genealogists know names and surnames and things of that nature. And they also tie into and know other tribes' history. So it's not like they're isolated and don't know about each other. And their history doesn't tie in. So it pretty much links up. So if you get the opportunity, go visit some of these tribes. Don't just call them. Go visit them. Talk to them. Interview them. There are over 573 nationally recognized tribes. Over 1,000 state recognized tribes. And then there are many more locally recognized tribes. So I'm sure out of all those tribes, we can find some that are melanated and know our true history. So with that diatribe, I'm going to get off my soapbox. And then we're going to get started. And Miss Brittany, if you will, we will be starting with Article 17, which is Commissioners Settle Claims. And I'm going to go on mute, and the mic is yours.
All right. Grand Rising to the chat. All right. It says Commissioners to Settle Claims, Article 17. All the claims arising under the provided for in the several articles of this treaty shall be examined and adjudicated by such commissioners, as such be appointed by the United States by and with advice and consent of the Senate of the United States for the purpose, and their decision shall be final on the certificate of the amount due the several claimants. They shall be paid by the United States. All stipulations in former treaties which have not been superseded or annulled by this shall continue in full force or virtue. Y'all give me a second. I'm a little nervous. It's my first time. United States to make advances for provisions, clothing, etc., Article 18. Whereas in consequence of the unsettled affairs of the Cherokee people in the early frost, their crops are insufficient to support their families, and great distress is likely to ensue, and whereas the nation will not, until after their removal, be able advantageously to expand, and the income of the permanent funds of the nation, it is therefore agreed that the annuities of the nation which may occur under the treaty for 2 years. The time fixed for their removal shall be expanded in provisions and clothing for the benefit the poor class of the nation. And the United States hereby agree to advance the sum for the purpose as soon after ratification of the treaty, as an appropriation for the same shall be made. It is however not intended in this article to interfere with that part of the annuities due the Cherokees west by the Treaty of 1819. Treaty binding with ratified Article 19. This treaty after the same shall be ratified by the President and Senate of the United States, shall be obligatory on the contacting parties. Article 20, supplemental article stricken out by Senate. And testimony whereof the commissioners and the chiefs, headmen, and people whose names are hereunto annexed, being duly authorized by the people and general council assembled, have affixed their hands and seals for themselves in behalf of the Cherokee Nation. I have examined the foregoing treaty, and although not present when it was made, I approve its provisions generally and therefore sign it. W.M. Carroll, J.P. Schermerhorn. Major Ridge, his ex-March James Foster, his ex-Mark Tess T. Eske, his ex-March Charles Moore, his ex-March George Chambers, his ex-March Tayiski, his ex-March Archilla Smith, his ex-March Andrew Ross, William Leslie, Katihi, his ex-March Tiga Iski, his ex-March Robert Rogers, John Gunter, J.A. Bell, Charles F. Foreman, William Rogers, George W. Adair, Elise Bondnet, James Starr, his ex-Mark Jesse Havre, his ex-Mark L.S., signed and sealed in the presence of Weston B. Thomas, Secretary, B.F. Curry, Special Agent, M. Wolf Bateman, First Lieutenant, 6th U.S. Infantry, Dispatching Agent, John L. Hooper, Lieutenant, 4th Infantry, C.M. Hitchcock, M.D., Assistant Surgeon, USA, G.W. Carey, W.M.H. Underwood, Cornelius D. Terhune, John W. Underwood, in compliance with instructions of the Council at New Echota, will sign this treaty. Stan Whitey, John Ridge, March 1st, 1836.
That was phenomenal.
Thank you.
And of course, you would have the one with all those names in it with the X marks.
Right?
But you handled it like a trooper. You did better than I would have done my first time out. That's for sure.
Thank you.
Grand Rising David Corey, Grand Rising Joshua James. We're going over the second part of the Treaty of 29 December with the Cherokee tribe, and the lovely voice you heard was Brittany Davis, who is an integral part of Auchtoctones Assembly, and she was covering Articles 17 through 19. And it was interesting about the clothing provision, and they were talking about again the poor class of Cherokees, and we all know that would be the more melanated Cherokees who were not receiving the benefits of, for lack of a better term, dual citizenship. So, seriously kidnapped information there. Poor Cherokees. How does that work? especially when it comes to the fact that we're
Mm.
tribal people, and there was strict governance. What changed? Something went wrong somewhere, right? I don't know.
Somebody wasn't paying attention at the wheel.
Yeah. And then you have all these X marks, meaning that instead of signing their names, the chiefs or the agents who couldn't write English just put their names, put an X for what their name was. I guess it was typed and they put an X by it, so it would delineate that this is their signature. There's a whole bunch of X's and very few signatures.
Mm-hmm.
But here's my question. It said the supplemental, it says Article 20, and it says supplemental article was stricken out by Senate. So was there another article to this, or was there an article before this? I wonder what they mean by supplemental article. Grand Rising Big Hawk. Something to think about. I guess we'll have to look that up. So where are we at? We're at December 31st, 1835. So y'all ready to put your hard hats on? Go deeper? Dig a little bit more?
Let's do it.
All right, brother, no sellout. You up to bat next.
Yeah, Free, you got that right. Anybody can mark an X.
Grand Rising on Cliff Tiff. No sellout, you there?
Nope. No, I'm trying to pull up the. I lost it. I lost the article messing around on the phone. Hold up.
Okay, making sure you ain't lost at Walmart or Wegmans somewhere.
No. Not again. Not again.
You know what? I'm not going through this with y'all right now. Nope.
December 31st, you say?
Mm-hmm.
We're not going through that part again either.
No, I found it this time. Look, second time's a charm, all right? Look, December 31st, 1835. All right. 7 stat 487. All right. Whereas the Western Cherokees have appointed a delegation to visit the Eastern Cherokees to assure them of the friendly disposition of their people and their desire that the nation should again be united as one people, and to urge upon them the expediency. Haven't seen that word in a while. Of accepting the overtures of the government, and that on their removal they may be assured of a hearty welcome and an equal participation with them in all the benefits and privileges of the Cherokee country west, and the undersigned two of said delegation being the only delegates in the nation from the west at the, where's the period? There's no period. From the west at the signing and sealing of the treaty lately concluded at New Echota between their eastern brethren in the United States. Okay. And having fully understood the provisions of the same, they agree to it in behalf of the Western Cherokees. But it is expressly understood that nothing in this treaty shall affect any claim of the Western Cherokees on the United States. Did that confuse anybody? TMH?
Yeah, because what they're doing now, it seems, is that they're separating the Western Cherokees from the Eastern Cherokees, the ones that stayed behind.
Okay, and I see where they had a couple of breaks. Let me read that one more time. Whereas the Western Cherokees have appointed a delegation to visit the Eastern Cherokees to assure them of the friendly disposition of their people and their desire that the nation should again be united as one people, and to urge upon them the expediency of accepting the overtures of the government, and that on their removal they may be assured of a hearty welcome and an equal participation with them in all benefits and privileges of the Cherokee country west, and the undersigned two of said delegation being only the delegates in the nation from the west at the signing and sealing of the treaty lately concluded at the New Echota between their eastern brethren and the United States. And having fully understood the provisions of the same, they agree to it in behalf of the Western Cherokees. But it is expressly understood that nothing in this treaty shall affect any claim of the Western Cherokees on the United States. In testimony we have this 31st day of December, 1835, hereunto set our hands and seals, James Rogers, John Smith, delegates from the Western Cherokees. Test, Ben F. Curry, Special Agent, M.W. Batman, First Lieutenant, 6th Infantry, J.No. L. Hooper, Lieutenant, 4th Infantry, Elias Boudinot. Schedule. Oh yeah, there's a chart. I think you can see that on your desktop version more than I can.
Yeah, but before you go any further, what we're seeing are the two delegates that are going to be representing them, which is James Rogers and John Smith, the delegates from the Western Cherokee. And these are delegates from the Western Cherokees. So I guess a more important question would be, are there delegates for the Eastern Cherokee? Or because the Eastern Cherokee have signed or are contemplating signing or have 2 years to sign, falling under being citizens of the United States, do they not get the same type of representation, and they just fall under representation of the state that they're in? I don't know. What do y'all think?
That is something to think about. I wonder if they're going to be mentioned.
I'm sure it is, because, you know, Bones read ahead, so he said it's going to get deep, so I guess we'll...
Yeah, it should be the representation of the state, because at this time, once you become a citizen, your state representatives speak for you now.
Mm. Yeah. So, go ahead, no, Salah. Sorry for interrupting.
All right. I know where I was. Man, where was I?
You were right scheduled, right below Elias Benoit.
Boudinot.
Schedule and estimated value.
Hold on, I just hit desktop version and got a whole nother version of this. Wait a minute. My bad. Where was I at? Oh, here we go. Article 20.
Free said divide and conquer. Exactly.
All right, here we are. Schedule an estimated value of the Osage half-breed reservations within the territory ceded to the Cherokees west of the Mississippi. And this was referred to in Article 5 on the form. Okay, this is just a reference from Article 5 chart. I don't know if that's relevant to what I'm reading, so. Yeah, it is actually. I hereby certify that the above schedule is the estimated value of the Osage reservations as made out and agreed upon with Colonel A.P. Choto, who represented himself as the agent or guardian of the above reserves. Let's see. And that's J.F. Schermerhorn. March 14th, 1835. All right. March 1st, 1836, 7 Stat 488. Proclamation, May 23rd, 1836. Supplementary article to a treaty concluded at New Echota, Georgia, December 29th, 1835, between the United States and Cherokee people. Whereas the undersigned were authorized at the general meeting of the Cherokee people held at New Echota, as above stated, to make and assent to such alterations in the preceding treaty as might be thought necessary. And whereas the President of the United States has expressed his determination not to allow any preemptions or reservations, his desire being that the whole Cherokee people should remove together and establish themselves in the country provided for them west of the Mississippi River. Preemption rights declared void, Article 1. It is therefore agreed that all the preemption rights and reservations provided for in Article 12 and 13 shall be and hereby relinquished and declared void. Article 1 voids reservations and rights provided in Article 12 and 13. Article 2. Whereas the Cherokee people have supposed that the sum of live millions of dollars fixed by the Senate in their resolution of day of March 1835 as the value of the Cherokee lands and possessions east of the Mississippi River was not intended to include the amount which may be required to remove them, nor the value of the certain claims which many of their people had against citizens of the United States, which suggestion has been confirmed by the opinion expressed to the War Department by some of the senators who voted upon the question, and whereas the president is willing that this subject should be referred to the Senate for their consideration, and if it was not intended by the Senate that the above mentioned sum of live millions of dollars should include the objects herein specified, that in that case such further provisions should be made, therefore as might appear to the Senate to be just.
So what I'm seeing, I guess it was a typo because it's supposed to be 5 millions of dollars. They put live millions. Also, too, it's talking in reference to that 5 millions of dollars, which is supposed to be, they're trying to determine whether it's minus the expenses, for all those steamboats and all the provisions that were made, and also in the money that was supposed to be set aside for the schools. So that's got to go up before the Senate to determine if they're going to be given the $5 millions of dollars in addition to the other, basically $500,000 in totality. That's what I'm saying from this. So basically, it's a back and forth to what exactly or how much money specifically will be donated or will be given to the representatives of these Cherokees. Because remember, there are representatives and agents that are receiving this money and dispersing it to the people. They're not giving it to the people directly. So, Grand Rising, C.A.B. Hope all is well. I'm sorry, don't sell out. Go ahead.
No problem. Allowance in lieu of preemption, etc. Article 3. It is therefore agreed that the sum of $600,000 shall be, and the same is hereby allowed to the Cherokee people to include the expense of their removal, and all claims of every nature and description against the government of the United States not herein otherwise expressly provided for, and to be in lieu of the said reservations and preemption of, and the sum of $300,000 for spoliations described in the first article of the above mentioned treaty. This sum of $600,000 shall be applied and distributed agreeably to the provisions of the said treaty, and any surplus which may remain after removal and payment of the claims so ascertained shall be turned over and belong to the education fund. Sound like the lottery. But it is expressly understood that the subject of this article is merely referred hereby to the consideration of the Senate, and if they shall approve the same, then this supplement shall remain part of the treaty.
So they're basically making it more plain about what the intention is of that extra, what is it, 650,000 and additional, what is it, 600,000, and that's another amount that was up there too. 300,000. So you're basically talking about $900,000, almost $1 million additional for moving expenses and spoliations.
Mm-hmm.
And cover any other claims made against the government in the process of moving. And remember, they have 2 years to move, and a lot can happen in 2 years. So this treaty gets very interesting, Very interesting. So, I'm sorry, no sound like go ahead, bro.
Let's see. Provisions for agency reservations not to interfere, etc. Article 4. It is also understood that the provisions in Article 16 for the agency reservation is not intended to interfere with the occupant right of a Cherokee's should their improvement fall within the same. It is also understood and agreed that the $100,000 appropriated in Article 12 for the poorer class of Cherokees and intended as a set-off to the preemption rights shall now be transferred from the funds of the nation and added to the general national fund of $400,000.
What?
Take this over here and put that over there. And let me read that again. It is also understood and agreed that the $100,000 appropriated in Article 12 for the poorer class of Cherokees and intended as a set-off to the preemption rights shall now be transferred from the funds of the nation and added to the general national fund of $400,000.
So it sounds like money that was supposed to be exclusively reserved for the poor class Cherokees are going to be taken out of that fund and then added to the general fund and allowing the representative to determine who gets it. That's what it sounds like. Causing further dissension.
All right. Expense of negotiations to be defrayed by the United States, Article 5. The necessary expenses attaching the negotiations of the aforesaid treaty and supplement, and also of such persons of the delegation may sign the same shall be defrayed by the United States. That sounds weird. In testimony whereof John F. Schermerhorn, Commissioner on the part of the United States, and the undersigned delegation have hereunto set their hands and seals this first day of March in year 1836. I believe that is 1836. J.F. Schermerhorn. Major Ridge, his X mark. James Foster, his X mark. Kaye, his X mark. Long Shell Turtle, his X mark. John Fields, his X mark. George Welch, his X mark. Andrew Ross, William Rogers, John Gunter, John A. Bell, Jose A. Foreman, Robert Sanders, Elias Boudinot, Johnson Rogers, James Starr, his X mark, Stan Waity, John Ridge, James Rogers, John Smith, his X mark, LS. Witnesses: Elbert Herring, Thos Glasscock, Alexander H. Everett, Jano Garland, Major U.S. Army, C.A. Harris, John Robb, I believe that's William Y. Hansel, Samuel J. Potts, and S. Rockwell. Chief Ross strenuously objected to it. Slowly and tediously, the United States labored to its fulfillment. Immigration officers, backed by an army which was at first under General E. Wool and later under General Winfield, two of the most humane officers of the army, were dispatched to the Cherokee Nation to superintend the immigration, not immigration. Chief Ross was informed of the unalterable intention of the government by the following communication. Quote, War Department, March 24th, 1837. Gentlemen, your memorial of the 16th instant address to the President of the United States has been laid before him, and I now proceed to communicate to you his decision upon the proposition you have submitted. The treaty concluded at New Echota on the 29th of December, 1835, has been ratified according to the forms prescribed by the Constitution, and it is the duty of the executive to carry into effect all its stipulations. In a spirit of liberal justice, let me get back there. according to the forms prescribed by the Constitution, and it is the duty of the executive to carry into effect all its stipulations in a spirit of liberal justice. The considerations to which you have invited the attention of the President were brought to the notice of the Senate before they advised its confirmation, and of the House of Representatives before they made appropriations therein provided for. Their final action must be regarded as the judgment of these branches of the government upon the degree of weight to which they were entitled. It remains for the executive to fulfill the treaty as the supreme law of the land.
All right. So, in the middle today, they use a lot of words to say very little. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Grand Rising, Do Division.
That's what it sounded like to me. A whole lot of round and round and went nowhere.
Grand Rising, Marlon T. Do Division says Elias Bedoin, a star in the West. What do you mean by that, Dudu? And as always, you have a link that we sent you, so you can come on in anytime and provide some insight. This is crazy. They're making this treaty ironclad to where there is no recourse, where there will be no recourse, even though the individuals who trusted these 20 representatives who signed on their behalf did them no justice whatsoever.
Oh, yeah. It took me a second to get back to the mute button. No, the Star in the West, that's, if I'm right, that's the dude that was doing the investigation to say that Native Americans were the lost tribes of Israel.
Yeah, dude just said no sellout mentioned him in the piece he just read. He says he wrote that book. Gets deeper and deeper. So you want to continue, no sellout, or you want me to pick it up from here?
Let me look through it real quick. Hold up. Man. Yeah, where was that?
Your second and third propositions.
That is a lot. Oh yeah, Chief Ross, no Washington. Oh, you said your second and third? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can finish up that and down. Man, I can finish up that. It is known to you, sir. I'll read up to that part. You see under the last line before it is bearing on the subject.
Okay, that's fine.
I'll read up to that. But now I gotta find where I was at. Oh, here we go. Your second and third propositions. Your second and third propositions, therefore, it is considered, cannot be acceded to, as they involve an admission that the Treaty of 1835 is an incomplete instrument. To your first proposition, I can only answer as the department has already assured you that any measure suggested by you will receive candid examination, if it be not inconsistent with or in contravention of the provisions of the existing treaty. Very respectfully, your most obedient servant, A.R. Poinsett. Messengers, I think that's the abbreviation for messengers. John Ross, R. Taylor, James Brown, Samuel Hunter, John Binger, George Sanders, John Looney, Aaron Price, William Dutch, and William S. Goody, Eastern and Western Cherokees. End quote, Washington. I don't know where that came from. Chief Ross exerted his influence among his people against the idea of immigration until July 1838. If a member of the council died, resigned, was expelled, or removed west, his place in the body was filled by appointment by Chief Ross. Proposition of the Cherokee delegation to General Scott.
Wait, hold up. Because
Hmm.
remember, originally, it was supposed to have been chosen by the council.
Hmm.
So now it goes from being chosen by the council to Chief John Ross.
It says if a member of the council died, resigned, was expelled, or removed west, his place in the body was filled by appointment by Chief Ross.
So he put that in there. He changed it.
But listen to the catch. If they were moved west.
Yep. Expelled or removed west.
So if you was a chief or if you had power and they wanted to supplant you, all they had to do was like, man, you on that west side.
Hmm.
Could that be? Never mind.
Yeah, nah.
I don't know. Like, could that be the West and the East problem with all these beefs that they easily just throw up? I'm just speculating.
And Dudovision said removed to Oklahoma. LJ Free said already that's a problem. That's incentive to move people west and shift power. Exactly. And if they're not, and if the chiefs that sent them as representatives were not privy to this until after it was signed, they are relatively screwed. Well, Cliff Tiff says how the West was won. Tell me about it. That's crazy. So Chief John Ross, instead of it being by delegation, it's by appointment of him. Grand Rising, Antonio. All right. So where are we at?
What happens? Does anybody know what would happen if he died, or was expelled or removed? Who would choose?
Well, it seems like it would go right back to the original portion of the article where the council would choose. But I'm sure before he passes, he has either removed any opposition or expelled those individuals, and they will carry out his wishes. Think about it. It says, if a member of the council died, resigned, was expelled or removed west, his place in the body was filled by appointment. So that means someone could be expelled or removed west.
Expelled or removed? What's the?
No, there's a difference.
You can walk on them and carry you by your coat.
Expelled meaning we get together and decide that we can be like, well, you unfit, and write it up that you're not fit to lead and replace you. Yeah, removed is more physical.
Yeah, definitely. So that was the proposition of Cherokee delegation to General Scott, Amohi District, Akohi Camp, July 23rd, 1838. And let's see, sir, in respectfully presenting for your consideration the following suggestions in relation to the removal of the Cherokee people to the West, it may be proper very briefly to advert to certain facts which have an important bearing on the subject. And I'm going to relinquish the mic.
All right. So before I read further, Dudovision says expel equals you're dead to the tribe. So that means you kicked out the tribe and you become a citizen of the United States?
Yeah, you're expelled, removed.
So that's like excommunicated or
yeah, ex.
What's another term? Exiled.
Yeah.
So who has the power to do that? Is it these representatives, these 20 representatives that were sent? Oak Cliff says, exiled on your own land. LJ Free says black. But as we look at this treaty, we're starting to see how certain things could have potentially happened and how we not only lost land, but we lost our chiefs. Our chiefs got replaced and moved, or flat out expelled. That's crazy. LJ Free said scary thought.
But if you think about it, we keep looking at the chiefs being expelled.
Mm-hmm.
Apply it towards the council that picked the chiefs. That's who you would expel.
Mm.
You would get rid of the power structure, because the chief is nothing but a picked person or a representative picked by the people.
Right.
You would corrupt the system that picked the chief first. That's why you would want to expel people.
Doodle Vision says, just like when you're expelled from school, you're not a part of the school. You can't participate in any school activities. It's facts.
Yeah, so you would expel the families that had the power to pick chiefs. That's who you would expel. You'll remove a chief and expel the people that can vote him into power to make sure it never happens again.
Right, because the council picks the chiefs and replaces the chiefs. But if you already have those individuals in place and remove the ones that's going to be in opposition to you, then you can stay in power indefinitely or until you pass. That's shady. I tell you. David Corey says land grab. Yeah, it was a land grab, all right. So I'm going to continue reading where it reads, it says, "It is known to you, sir, that the undersigned delegates of the Cherokee Nation submitted to the Honorable Secretary of War the project of the treaty on the basis of a removal of the Cherokee Nation from all the lands now occupied by them eastward of the Mississippi, and on terms the most of which the Honorable Secretary expresses himself as not willing to grant. The present condition of the Cherokee people is such that all disputes as to the time of emigration are set at rest, being already severed from their homes and their property, their persons being under the absolute control of the commanding general and being altogether dependent on the benevolence and humanity of that high officer for the suspension of their transportation to the West at a season and under circumstances in which sickness and death were to be apprehended to an alarming extent. All inducements to prolong their stay in this country are taken away, and however strong their attachment to the homes of their fathers may be, their interests and their wishes now are only to depart as early as may be consistent with their safety, which will appear from the following extract from their proceedings on this subject." Doodle Vision says your new councils are all appointed by John Ross. Yeah. And just from reading this part, that even though they gave them 2 years to move, they're trying to expedite the process. Free says if you can't be compelled, you'll be expelled. Model of a hijacked tribe. And it says, being already severed from their homes and their property, their persons being under the absolute control of the commanding general, and being altogether dependent on the benevolence and humanity of that high officer for the suspension of their transportation to the West at a season and under circumstances in which sickness and death are to be apprehended to an alarming extent. All inducements to prolong their stay in this country are taken away. So basically, even though they was given two years to move, if you wasn't moving when this party said move, then you would basically have to be under your own power to move on a ration of what, $30 a year? So it goes on to read, resolved by the National Committee and Council and people of the Cherokee Nation and General Council assembled, that it is the decided sense and desired of this General Council that the whole business of the immigration of our people shall be undertaken by the nation, and the delegation are hereby advised to negotiate the necessary arrangements with the commanding general for that purpose. In conformity, therefore, with the wishes of our people, and with the fact that the delegation has been referred by the Honorable Secretary of War, to conclude the negotiation in relation to immigration with the Commanding General in the Cherokee country, we beg leave, therefore, very respectfully, to propose that the Cherokee Nation will undertake the whole business of removing their people to the west of the Mississippi, that the immigration shall commence at the time stipulated in a pledge given to you by our people as a condition of suspension of their transportation until the strictly season should pass away, unless prevented by some cause which shall appear reasonable to yourself. They're trying to get these individuals to move as quickly as possible. Then it says that the per capita expense of removal be based on the calculation of 1 wagon and team and 6 riding being required for 15 persons. That the Cherokee shall have the selection of physicians and other persons as may be required for the safety and comfortable concluding of several detachments to the place of destination, their compensation to be paid by the United States. We have the honor to be your obedient servants, John Ross, Elijah Hicks, Edward Gunter, Samuel Gunter, Sitwaki White Path, Richard Taylor, Major General Winfield Scott, U.S. Army Commanding, etc. So basically what it looks like, hold on, Judah Vision says, those 3 different groups from same bloodlines. I mentioned before, 1, those that were removed to the reservations, 2, those that left on their own, and 3, those that remained and became citizens. Cliff Tip says, this Section 8 voucher has to be used in 1 year or you'll lose it. That's exactly what they're saying, Cliff. One stipulation is your baby daddy cannot live with you. Ain't nothing new under the sun. Y'all are wild. So yeah, they started to put these stipulations on the removal and moving, and like Doodle Vision says, you were removed by the government at their dime. You were moved on your own by their dime, or you remained. General Scott acceded to the proposition of the Cherokee delegation on July 23, 1838, with the understanding that the Cherokee take every precaution to get all the Cherokees, except certain ones that had been allowed to stay, to become citizens of the states, and such of the treaty party as might object to removal under the superintendence of Ross and his associates. 1. The arrangement was finally concurred in on the 27th of July. 2. General Scott fixed a date for the departure of the first contingent on the first day of September 3rd on July 31st. The committee submitted an estimate of transportation for each 1,000 immigrants, distance 800 miles, and 80 days travel, with 20 persons to a wagon. Wow. So they had a departure date, and they had the first contingent that was supposed to be leaving on September 3rd. It says on July 31st, the committee submitted an estimate of transportation for each 1,000 immigrants, distance 800 miles and 80 days travel, with 20 persons to the wagon. So you got 20 persons to the wagon.
Real quick before you go.
Now go ahead.
We still in 1838, ain't we?
Yes, we are.
You know, it's kind of funny that every time they give you the Trail of Tears, they try to make it seem something else. I need everybody to realize this is the Trail of Tears right here. This is 1838 Indian removal. Just let that sit in for a second. That these people wasn't walking. They had carriages, train coaches once they got to certain parts, steamboats, Frigidaires. Somebody lying.
So then they got the cost of what it took to move these people. 50 wagons and teams at a daily expense of $350, including forage. Total $28,000. Returning $7 for each 20 miles. total $14,000. 250 extra horses at 40 cents each per day, total $8,000. Exactly, Cliff too. Caravans. That's exactly it. Ferrages, etc. 1,000. 80,000 rations at 16 cents each. Conductor at $5 per day. Wait a minute. If you walking, why would you need a conductor? But they got a band? Are they playing marching music?
And what he conducting?
Mm-hmm.
A train?
Assistant conductor at $3 per day, which is $240. Physician at $5 per day. Oh, Cliff says gas money. Returning $15 for every 100 miles. Commissary at $2.50 per day. Assistant commissary at $2 per day. Wagon master at $2.50 per day. So you had a wagon master. So these people were being driven. They weren't driving. They were being, what's the term I'm looking for? Chauffeured. You had an assistant wagon master at $2 per day. And you had an interpreter at $2.50 per day. So the total for this first iteration was $65,880. So I guess the thought of banging on somebody's door and escorting them out and making them walk in the cold with just with the shoes and clothes you got on your back, I guess that's a misnomer. Unless this treaty is lying. I don't know. Cherokee Agency, August 1st, 1838. Gentlemen, in your note of yesterday, you estimated that $65,880 will be the necessary cost of every 1,000 Cherokees immigrated by land from this to their new country. So for every 1,000 Cherokees immigrated, it would be $65,880. Due Division says they took several means of transportation and checked in at forts. Hopefully a show can be done on these forts. You'll find out how the removed Indians were processed at these forts. Wow. Okay. That's something we could definitely do. As I have already stated to some of you in conversation, I think the estimate an extravagant one, Take the principal item or basis of your calculation, 1 wagon and 5 saddle horses for every 20 souls. I have already consented with a view to lighten the movement by land, that all the sick and crippled and superannuated of the nation be left at the depots until the rivers be again navigable for steamboats. All heavy articles of property not wanted on the road may wait for the same mode of convenience. So they were even making appropriations for their stuff. They didn't have to leave anything. All the stuff that was too heavy was actually going on a steamboat once the waters rose high enough. LJ Free says this sounds more like an entourage when you read what was really going on. Exactly. Deducting the persons just mentioned, I am confident that it will be found that among every 1,000 individuals taken in families without selection, there are at least 500 strong men, women, boys, and girls not only capable of marching 12 or 15 miles a day, but to whom the exercise will be beneficial, and another 100 able to go on foot half that distance daily. There will then be left, according to your basis, only 450 individuals, most of them children, to ride, and children are light. The 250 saddle horses or ponies would accommodate as many rides, leaving but 200 souls to be steadily transported in 50 wagons, or only 4 to a wagon. So now they're negotiating what these costs are.
Hey, the exercise would be beneficial.
Oh, Cliff Tiff says, why do I hear the song On with Christian Soldiers? Excuse me. And he says, now the wagons are large, and each drawn by 5 or 6 horses, as must be presumed for your high estimate of $7 for each wagon going and returning. It strikes me that one such team and 5 horses ought to accommodate on the route 30 or 35 immigrants, including substance, for a day or two from depot to depot, which is basically what James was talking about. Depots will be the forts. I repeat that I do not absolutely reject or cut down your estimate, which I think also too high, in putting down the rations at 16 cents each. The whole expense of the immigration is to be paid out of appropriations already made by Congress, the general surplus of which is to go to the Cherokee Nation in various forms. Therefore, they have a direct interest in conducting the movement as economically as comfort will permit. Nevertheless, for this reason stated, I wish that several items of the estimated submitted be reconsidered. I remain, gentlemen, yours respectively, Winfield Scout, messengers John Ross, E. Hicks, J. Brown, and other agents, etc. And that's the end of that treaty. Grand Rising Patrick Gabriel, you just came in on the reading of the end of the treaty for the Cherokee. (1835). LJ Free says, so Home Depot equals home fort? That's what I would surmise it to, Free. Because they're going from depot to depot. So it means they would also have to have means and rations for them there as well. So it means they would have to have that stuff fortified. And as he stated, any excess would go back to the Cherokee Nation anyway. So the money has already been allocated. He's just trying to use as less resources as possible. Because not only are you using Cherokee and the agents, but you also using military. Due Division says, keep in mind, while this was going on, the Texas-Mexican War was also taking place. Wow.
Yeah, and also remember that depots are forts. Depots are storage spots for forts. For forts during the wartime. You done heard it before. It just been so long that nobody uses it. Ammo depot.
That's correct. So let's do some digging about this Chief John Ross.
Uh-oh.
I think we'll find this gentleman very interesting. So, of course, we're going to Wikipedia.
80% chance he had some sit-downs with Joseph Brant. I'm just saying.
I don't know. Let's find out.
But it's kind of, while you're looking that up, like I said again, it's kind of funny that they'll tell you one thing, but now you digging through the treaties and you're seeing what was really done. Say again, 1838. This Trail of Tears here sound kind of comfortable for somebody.
Yeah. If you figure you're only walking 10 to 11 miles a day, that's not a lot. Especially for people that were in pretty good condition.
It's not even that. We talk about the time where there are no automobiles and stuff, so people don't know life how we know it right now.
Right.
So that's nothing.
Doodle Vision says, go to Home Depot now, you'll find a storage of materials to build.
Yep.
So I put the link to John Ross, Cherokee Chief. So this is one of the individuals that they sent in their place because he had the features to get a quote unquote good deal. So they sent somebody from that tribe to represent them that looked more like the Americans than he did in India. Marlon P says, how are all these things going on at the same time during the time when everything is so limited? Well, they had an unlimited amount of people, us.
Mm-hmm.
They had an unlimited amount of resources, ours. So it says he's the principal chief of the Cherokee Nation. Remember, principal chief is the title that the Europeans give you when you're the chief of all chiefs.
Yep.
He was succeeded by William P. Ross. And William Potter Ross, also known as William Ross, was the principal chief of the Cherokee Nation from 1866 through 1867 and 1872 to 1875. Born to a Scottish father and a mixed-blood Cherokee mother, he was raised in a bilingual home. Ross attended English-speaking schools, and he also attended Princeton.
Okay. My question is this. What do they mean by mixed blood Cherokee mother?
Meaning the mother was probably mixed with some European. And we'll find that out because that was John Ross's son I was talking about, William P. Ross. He was born October 3rd, 1970 in Turkeytown, Alabama. And he died August 1st, 1866 in Washington. Man, all these chiefs better stay out of D.C. because this is where he died.
What? No, yeah, I remember that. I don't want to go to D.C. no more.
No, I mean, just don't be a chief. I'm just saying. He's buried in a Ross Cemetery, Cherokee Country, Oklahoma. His spouse was Quaddy Brown Henley and Mary Brown Stapler. His daughter is Mary G. Ross, and his nephew is William P. Ross. He has 7 children. It says he's known for the opposition to the Treaty of Echota, Trail of Tears, Union supporter during the American Civil War. Boom, you called it. It's right there. The Treaty of Echota, Trail of Tears, Union supporter during the American Civil War. So there it is. So let's find out a little bit about Chief John Ross. It says, what is his name? It says October 3rd, 1970 through August 1st, 1866. His name in Cherokee means mysterious little white bird. Was the principal chief of the Cherokee Nation from 1828 to 1866, serving longer in this position than any other person. I wonder why. Described as the Moses of his people. Are you kidding me? Think about this. They said he was described as the Moses of his people. He took his people out of Egypt, took them to the promised land. Ross influenced the Indian nation through such tumultuous events as the relocation to Indian territory and the American Civil War. John Ross was the son of a Cherokee mother and a Scottish father. His mother and maternal grandmother were of mixed Scots-Cherokee ancestry. Since his maternal...
Here we go again.
Let me finish. Since his maternal grandmother was another Scottish immigrant. As a result, young John, a Cherokee by blood quantum, grew up bilingual and bicultural, an experience that served him well when his parents decided to send him to schools that served other mixed-race Cherokee. After graduation, he was appointed an Indian agent in 1811 during the War of 1812. He served as adjutant of a Cherokee regiment under the command of Andrew Jackson. After the Red Stick War ended, Ross demonstrated his business acumen by starting a tobacco farm in Tennessee. In 1816, he built a warehouse and trading post on the Tennessee River north of the mouth of Chattanooga Creek.
You know who this is, right? Remember the name Ross and put it in today's time.
And started a ferry service that carried passengers from the south side of the river, Cherokee Nation, to the north side, USA. His business served as a start of a community known as Ross's Landing on Tennessee River in modern-day Chattanooga, Tennessee. Currently, John Ross developed a keen interest in Cherokee politics and attracting the attention of the Cherokee elders, especially Principal Chiefs Path Killer and Charles R. Hicks, who along with Major Ridge became his political mentors. So who you trying to say he is? I'm Flying Squirrel is goofing. He says Ricky Ross, Diana Ross, Rick Ross, really?
The Ross family.
Doodle Vision says Scots equal those who wouldn't shoot, wouldn't shoot Dutch. Ross first went to Washington. Hold on, make sure I didn't miss anything. Ross first went to Washington, D.C. in 1816 as part of a Cherokee delegation to negotiate issues of national boundaries, land ownership, and white encroachment. As the only delegate fluent in English, Ross became the principal negotiator despite his relative youth. When he returned to Cherokee Nation in 1817, he was elected to the National Council. He became council president in the following year. The majority of the council were men like Ross who were wealthy, educated, English-speaking, and mixed blood. Even the traditional full-blood Cherokee perceived that he had skills necessary to contest the whites. Back up. Golden Moon, aka KD, says billionaire Ross, Texas. And LJ Free says bilingual and bicultural, and eventually chose a side and told the ancestors by, basically.
Now you said that was Golden Moon that said that? Dead on.
Mm-hmm. Ross, billionaire Ross.
Yep.
So it says that in 1824, hold on. In 1817, he was elected to the National Council. He became a council president the following year. The majority of the council were men like Ross who were wealthy, educated, English-speaking, and of mixed blood. Even the traditionalist, full-blood Cherokee perceived that he had the skills necessary to contest the whites' demands that the Cherokee cede their land and move beyond the Mississippi River. In this position, Ross' first action was to reject an offer for $200,000 from the U.S. Indian agent made to the Cherokee to voluntarily relocate. So his own people put him in power because they thought, so we talking about the full-blooded Cherokee. They weren't killed off. They said, hey.
The ones that look like us. The ones that look just like us.
Put him in power. Said, yo, you would be better off dealing with them because you have more influence and you speak good English. Now, this is just one portion of the story. We'd have to hear from Cherokee Nation about this to either confirm or deny. But from this perspective, our own people put him in power. Him and the other ones who were Indians of mixed blood. Patrick Gabriel says Scottish equals Freemasons. Grand Rising, Mr. TJ. So we're going over who John Ross is. John Ross was the individual that signed a treaty of 29 December 1835 that basically sold out the Cherokee Nation and split them into two groups. The Eastern Band Cherokee, who were citizens, and the Western Band Cherokee, who ended up being in Oklahoma. So Ross's first action was to reject an offer for over $200,000 from the U.S. Indian agent made for the Cherokee to voluntarily relocate. Thereafter, Ross made more trips to Washington, even as white demands intensified. In 1824, Ross boldly petitioned Congress to redress the Cherokee grievances, making the Cherokee the first tribe to ever do so. Along the way, Ross built political support in the capital for the Cherokee cause. Both Path Killer and Charles R. Hicks died on January 27th. Hicks' brother, William, was appointed interim chief. Ross and Major Ridge shared responsibilities for the affairs of the tribe. William Hicks did not impress the Cherokee as a leader. They elected Ross as permanent principal chief in October 1828, a position he held until his death. The issue of removal split the Cherokee Nation politically. Ross, backed by the majority, tried repeatedly to stop white political powers from forcing the tribe to move. They became known as the National Party. Others, who came to believe that future resistance would be futile, wanted to seek the best settlement they could get. They formed the Treaty Party, or Ridge Party, led by Major Ridge. The Treaty Party was convinced to sign the Treaty of New Echota on December 29, 1835, requiring the Cherokee to leave by 1838. Neither Ross nor the council approved it, but the federal government regarded the treaty as valid. To enforce the treaty, the federal government, the army, to move those who did not depart by 1838 in an action known as Even After the Trail of Tears. About 1/4 of the Cherokee forced to move down along the trail. The dead included Ross's wife, Quate. So that's what happened. Well, at least that's what it says it happened. So, because based on the treaty, it made it seem like they were in negotiation, but there were two parties.
Oh, 2 treaties were signed.
Say again.
2 treaties got signed. The Ridge Cherokee signed the treaty, and these Cherokees signed the treaty for the same area.
He said Ross tried unsuccessfully to restore political unity after the arrival in Indian Territory. Unknown people assassinated the leaders of the Treaty Party. Really? Unknown peoples? And except for Stan Waite, who escaped and became Ross's most implacable foe, soon the issue of slavery refueled the old division. The Treaty Party morphed into Southern Party, while the National Party largely became the Union Party. Ross initially counseled neutrality, believing that joining in the white man's war would be disastrous for the tribe. After Union forces abandoned their forts, the Indian Territory, Ross reversed himself and signed the treaty with the Confederacy. He later fled to Union-held Kansas, and Stan Waite became the de facto chief. The Confederates lost the war. Waite became the last Confederate general to surrender, and Ross returned to his post as principal chief. Confronted with negotiating the Reconstruction Treaty with the United States, he made yet another trip to Washington, where he died on August 1st, 1866. Grand Rising family.
Yeah, he died 1866.
Mm-hmm.
There's some holes in this story.
Of course there are. That's the reason why we would need some Cherokee to fill us in. Doodle Vision says, Ross wanted to remain neutral. Equals, this war is messing with my money, man. I Am Flying Squirrel says, what's in his will? That's a good question, I Am Flying Squirrel. Because what we're hearing is that the Cherokee that were in Oklahoma under John Ross fought with the Union. The other Cherokee, because remember, we still talk about the Revolutionary War. They fought. Now this is after the Revolutionary War. So the Cherokee fought with you got one side Cherokee that fought with the Union, another side that fought with the Confederacy. And of course, the
Eastern Band fought with the Eastern Band.
Yeah, because they didn't want to lose their land. What land they had been given to them.
But remember the story about the Eastern Band. They didn't have land. Those were refugees that ran up in the mountains.
That's right.
The Eastern Band is the ones that formed the Treaty Party. They end up signing a treaty before Ross and them. 2 sets signed the treaty for that land. And the Eastern Band got awarded Carolina. That's why you had the Eastern Band on Carolina. Then you had the ones with Ross and them that was out west.
Okay.
Because remember, the ones that stayed, they weren't considered Cherokee no more.
Right.
They were citizens.
Got it. Since early life and education, Ross, also known by his Cherokee name, Gewisgawi, was born in Turkeytown in modern-day Alabama, near the head of the Coosa River to Mobile, which is called Nee McDonald, and her husband Daniel Ross, an immigrant Scots trader. His siblings who survived the adulthood included Jane Ross Cody, Elizabeth Grace Ross, Lewis Ross, Andrew Tusotuma Ross, Margaret Ross Hicks, and Maria Ross Mulkey. So now they talk about the genealogy. Because his mother and grandmother were mixed-race Cherokee under the matrilineal traditions, Ross belonged to her Bird clan. His great-grandmother, Iugi, a full-blood Cherokee, had married William Shorey, a Scottish interpreter. Their daughter Anna married John MacDonald, a Scotch trader. So these were the Dutch they were marrying in. Turkeytown equal Hokies equal Catawba Sapani. Wow. Yeah. David Corey says, what sports team named Hokies? That would be Virginia Tech, David.
Go Hokies.
So these are Isa or Sioux. They will soon become Sioux. It says childhood and education. Ross spent his childhood with his parents in near Lookout Mountain. Educated in English by white men in a frontier American environment, Ross spoke the Cherokee language poorly, but his bicultural background later allowed him to represent the Cherokee to the United States government. Many full-blood Cherokee frequented his father's trading company, so he encountered tribal members on many levels. As a child, Ross participated in tribal events, such as the Green Corn Festival. The elder Ross insisted that John also receive a rigorously classical education. After being educated at home, Ross pursued higher studies with the Reverend Gideon Blackburn, who established 2 schools in southeast Tennessee for Cherokee children. Classes were in English and students were mostly of mixed races like Ross. The young Ross finished his education at an academy in Southwest Point near Kingston, Tennessee. There you go. It says Anglo-Metis background of Cherokee Moses. Ross's life resembled prominent Anglo-Metis in the northern United States and Canada. Scots and English fur traders in North America were typically men of social status and financial standing who married high-ranking Native American women. Now, who does this sound like? This sounds like the Iroquois, or the Haudenosaunee, all over again.
Yep.
Haudenosaunee. That's who this is. It's the same story, just different tribe.
But also remember, all this stuff is going on around the same time.
Yeah.
It's just different people telling the story now.
They educated their children in bicultural and multilingual environments. The mixed-race children often marry and rose to position and stature in society, both in political and economic terms. John Ross survived 2 wives and had several children. He married Elizabeth Quate Brown Henley, 1791 to 1839. In 1812 or 1813, she was a Cherokee born in 1791 and a widow with 1 child. Her previous husband, Robert Henley, may have died during the War of 1812. Quate Ross died in 1839 in Arkansas on the Trail of Tears, as discussed below, but was survived by their children, James McDonald Ross, William Allen Ross, Jane Ross, Megas Knife, Silas Dean Ross, and George Washington Ross. John Ross remarried in 1844 to Mary Stapler, who he survived by less than a year. Their surviving children were Anne Bryan Ross Dobson and John Ross Jr., although John Ross Sr. would be succeeded as chief by his nephew John P. Ross. Doodle Vision says mixed race equals passive for white. Exactly.
They got done French again.
So at the age of 20, having completed his education and his bilingual skills, Ross received an appointment as U.S. Indian agent to the Western Cherokee and sent to their territory in present-day Arkansas. During the War of 1812, he served as an adjutant in the Cherokee Regiment. He fought under General Andrew Jackson at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend against the British allied Upper Creek warriors known as the Red Sticks. Doodle Vision talks about the Red Stick Wars all the time. Businessman and founder of Chattanooga. Ross began a series of business ventures which made him among the wealthiest of all Cherokee. He derived the majority of his wealth from cultivating 170 acres of tobacco in Tennessee, worked by 12 slaves, probably family members. In 1816, he founded Ross's Landing, survived by a ferry crossing. After the Cherokee were removed to Oklahoma in the 1830s, American settlers changed the name of Ross Landing to Chattanooga. In addition, Ross established a trading firm and warehouse. In total, he earned towards $1,000 a year, roughly $14.8 thousand in today's terms. In 1827, Ross moved to Rome, Georgia, to be closer to New Echota, the Cherokee capital. In Rome, Ross established a ferry along the headwaters of the Coosa River, close to the home of Major Ridge, an older, wealthy, and influential Cherokee leader. By December 1836, Ross's properties were appraised at $23,665, which is roughly $53,990. No, yeah, $539,921 today. He was one of the 5 wealthiest men in Cherokee Nation. Political apprenticeship. In 1811 to 1827, Ross learned how to conduct negotiations with the United States and the skills required to run a national government. After 1814, Ross's political career as Cherokee legislature and diplomat progressed with the support of individuals such as the Principal Chief Pathkiller, Assistant Principal Chief Charles R. Hicks, and Casey Holmes, an elder statesman of the Cherokee Nation, as well as the women elders of his clan, their mothers. In 1813, as relations with the United States became more complex, older, uneducated chiefs such as Pathkiller could not effectively defend Cherokee interests. Ross' ascent showed that Cherokee leaders recognized the importance of educated English-speaking leaders. Both Pathkiller and Hicks trained Ross, who served as a clerk and worked on financial and political matters in the nation. They also steeped him in Cherokee tradition. In a series of letters to Ross, Hicks outlined known Cherokee traditions. Grand Rising Laurel 1. Now this is interesting because it says that as the older Cherokee leaders, as the United States became more complex. Well, I don't think the United States became more complex. I think what happened is that the education that these mixed bloods were receiving were teaching them literature and being wordy, which made it difficult for the chiefs to understand. The older chiefs to understand. Because if you look at that treaty, there's way too many words in it, way more than needed. But someone like John Ross could understand it because he went to school and he was trained in that. But that's just my personal opinion. In 1860, the Chiefs Council named Ross in his first delegation to American leaders in Washington, D.C. The delegation of 1816 was erected to resolve sensitive issues, including national boundaries, land ownership, and white encroachment on Cherokee land. Only Ross was fluent in English, making him a central figure, although Cherokee society traditionally favored older leaders. And think about this, you still had Indian agents who were translators. But Ross, because he was fluent in English, basically they cut out the middleman. But he didn't speak the Cherokee language that good. So where would his allegiance normally lie? In November 1817, the Cherokee formed the National Council. Ross was elected to 13 members body. Was elected to a 13-member body. Now, here's something that's important for people that don't think that tribes actually had governance. It says in 1817, the Cherokee formed the National Council. It says Ross was elected to a 13-member body where each of the men served 2-year terms. The National Council was created to consolidate Cherokee political authority after General then President Andrew Jackson made 2 treaties with small cliques of Cherokee representing minority factors. Membership in the National Council placed Ross among the Cherokee ruling elite. The majority of the men were wealthy, mixed race, and English speaking, although most Cherokees still spoke only Cherokee. Aha! So they had no choice but to trust these men. President of the National Committee. In November 1818, just before the General Council meeting with the U.S., Indian agent Joseph McMahon, assigned to deal with the Cherokee, Ross became president of the National Committee, a position he would hold through 1827. The council selected Ross for the leadership position because they believed he had the diplomatic skills necessary to rebuff American requests to secede Cherokee lands. He soon refused McMahon's offer of $200,000 conditioned upon the Cherokee voluntarily remove themselves beyond the Mississippi. And we all know that eventually they end up paying him $5 million opposed to $200,000. Due division says hillbillies. In 1819, the council sent Ross to Washington, D.C. He assumed a larger leadership role. The delegation proposed to clarify the positions of the Treaty of 1817, both to limit the ceded lands and clarify Cherokee right to the remaining lands. Secretary of War John C. Calhoun pressed Ross to cede large tracts of land in Tennessee and Georgia. Although he refused, the U.S. government press continued and intensified. In October 1822, Calhoun requested that the Cherokee relinquish their land claimed by Georgia in fulfillment of the United States obligation under the Compact of 1802. Before responding to Calhoun's proposition, Ross first ascertained the sentiment of the Cherokee people. They were unanimously opposed to further secession of land. Just checking the chat, make sure I haven't missed anything. David Corey says Texas Scorpio. Y'all are funny. In January 1824, Ross traveled to Washington to defend the Cherokee position on their land. Calhoun offered 2 solutions to the Cherokee delegation: either relinquish title to their lands and remove west, or accept denaturalization and become citizens of the United States. Rather than accept Calhoun's ultimatum, Ross directly petitioned Congress for Cherokee cause on April 15, 1824. This fundamentally altered the traditional relationship between the Indian nation and the U.S. government. Never before had an Indian nation petitioned Congress with grievances. In Ross's correspondence, what had previously been the tone of petitions by submissive Indians was replaced by assertive defenders. Ross was able to argue subtle points about legal responsibilities as well as whites. Some in Washington recognized the change. Future President John Quincy Adams wrote, "There was less Indian oratory and more the commonly style of white discourse than in some chief speech on their first introduction." Adams specifically noted Ross as the writer of the delegation and remarked that they sustained a written controversy against the Georgia delegation with great advantage. Georgia's delegation inadvertently acknowledged Ross's skill. An editorial published in the Georgia Journal charged that the Cherokee delegation's letters were fraudulent because too refined had been written or dictated by an Indian. Grand Rising, Tago W.
Peace, peace.
We're going over the bio of Chief John Ross, who was the chief of the Cherokee tribe, the Western Band Cherokee, during the mid-1800s, from 1835 to 1866. He's the one that signed the treaty, or one of the treaties that eventually led to the Trail of Tears. Oh, Tago. Thank you. Thank you for correcting me. Tago. So now we're going to talk about the principal chief of Cherokee Nation. Okay, so in January 1827, Pathkiller, the Cherokee's principal chief and last hereditary chief, and 2 weeks later, Charles R. Hicks, Ross's mentor, both died. Ross, as president of the National Committee, and Major Ridge, as Speaker of the National Council, were responsible for the affairs of the tribe. In a letter dated February 23, 1827, to Colonel Hugh Montgomery, the Cherokee agent Ross wrote that with the death of Hicks, he had assumed responsibility for all public business of the nation. Charles Hicks' brother, William, served briefly as interim chief until a permanent chief could be elected. Although he believed he was the natural heir to his brother's position, William Hicks had not impressed the tribe with his abilities. A majority of the people knew that during the year, Ross, not Hicks, had taken care of the mundane business of the tribe. On October 17, 1828, the Cherokee elected John Ross as principal chief. The Cherokee Council passed a series of laws creating a bicameral national government. In 1822, they created the Cherokee Supreme Court, capping the creation of a three-branch government. In May 1827, Ross was elected to the 24-member Constitutional Committee. It drafted a constitution calling for a principal chief, a council of principal chiefs, and a national committee which together would form the General Council of the Cherokee Nation, a constitutional republic. Although the Constitution was ratified in October 1827, it did not take effect until October 1828, on which point Ross was elected principal chief. He was repeatedly re-elected and held the position until his death in 1866. He was very popular among both full-bloods and who comprised 3/4 of the population and mixed bloods. So the full-bloods, who was at this time 3/4 of the population, they were behind him because they thought that he was going to be able to help them. And I guess he did up to a certain point.
1866.
The Cherokee had created a constitutional republic with delegated authority capable of formulating a clear, long-range policy to protect national rights. Free said the tribe was looking at William Hicks like, I'm waiting to be impressed.
Then with the Sean Connery.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about the Supreme Court litigation. Because remember, they had petitioned Congress to keep the white encroachment of the land down. Ross found support in Congress from individuals in the National Republican Party, such as Senators Henry Clay, Theodore Freeling, Yensen, and Daniel Webster, and Representatives Ambrose Spencer and David Crockett. That name sounds familiar, doesn't it? Davy Crockett. Despite this support, in April 1829, John H. Eaton, Secretary of War, informed Ross that President Jackson would support the right of Georgia to extend her laws over the Cherokee people. On December 8, 1829, President Andrew Jackson made a speech announcing his intention to pass a bill through Congress by following spring requiring Indian tribes living in the southeastern states to move west of Mississippi. On December 19, 1829, the Georgia legislature enacted a series of laws which confiscated a large section of Cherokee land, nullified Cherokee law with the confiscation area, banned further meetings of the Cherokee government in Georgia, declared contracts between Indians and whites null and void unless witnessed by two whites, disallowed Indians from testifying against a white person in court, and forbade Cherokee to dig for gold on their own lands. The laws were made effective June 1, 1830. These were calculated to force the Cherokee to move.
Seems to me that's how they really got Georgia.
Yeah. And the thing was, they made a move because of the gold.
Yep, a lot of people keep forgetting about that. There was more gold found on the East Coast than there was on the West Coast.
In May 1830, Congress endorsed Jackson's policy of removal by passing the Indian Removal Act. Jackson signed the act on May 23rd. It authorized the president to set aside lands west of Mississippi in exchange for the lands of the Indian nations in the southeast. In the summer of 1830, Jackson argued the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, and Creek to sign individual treaties accepting removal from their homelands. The Cherokee refused to attend a meeting in Nashville that Jackson proposed. The other tribes signed off on Jackson's terms. When Ross and the Cherokee delegations failed in their efforts to protect Cherokee lands through dealings with the executive branch of Congress, Ross took the radical step of defending the Cherokee rights through the U.S. courts. In June 1830, the urging of Senator Webster and Senator Frelinghuysen, the Cherokee delegation selected William Wirt, U.S. Attorney General in the Monroe and Adams administrations, to defend Cherokee rights before the U.S. Supreme Court. Wirt argued two cases on behalf of the Cherokee Nation versus Georgia, and Worcester versus Georgia. In Cherokee Nation versus Georgia, Chief Justice John Marshall acknowledged that the Cherokee were a sovereign nation, stating the Cherokee as a state, as a distinct political society separate from others, capable of managing its own affairs and governing itself, has an opinion of the majority of the judges being completely successful. But he did not compel President Jackson to take action that would defend the Cherokee from Georgia's laws because he did not find the U.S. Supreme Court had original jurisdiction over a case in which a tribe was a party. In 1832, the Supreme Court further defined the relation of the federal government and the Cherokee Nation in Worcester versus Georgia. The court found that Georgia could not extend its laws to the Cherokee Nation because that was power of the federal government. Marshall stated that the acts of Georgia are repugnant to the Constitution, laws, and treaties of the United States. They inferred forcibly with the relations established between the United States and the Cherokee Nation, the regulations of which, according to the settled principles of the Constitution, are committed exclusively to the government of the Union. The Cherokee were considered sovereign enough to legally resist the government of Georgia, and they were encouraged to do so. The court maintained that the Cherokee Nation was dependent on the federal government, much like a protectorate state, but still a sovereign entity. But the dispute was made moot when federal legislation in the form of the Indian Removal Act exercised the federal government's legal power to handle the whole affair. The series of decisions embarrassed Jackson politically, as Whigs attempted to use this issue in 1832 election. They largely supported his earlier opinion that an Indian question was one of the best handled by the federal government and not local authorities. Golden Moon said, did they make laws up as they go? Of course they did. Meanwhile, the Cherokee Nation had encountered financial hard times. U.S. government had stopped paying the agreed upon $6,000 annuity for previous land cessions. Georgia had effectively cut off any income from the gold fields in Cherokee lands. I'll repeat that. Georgia had effectively cut off any income from the gold fields in Cherokee lands. And the Cherokee Nation... Say again? And the Cherokee Nation's application for federal government loan was rejected in February 1831. With great difficulty and private donations, Ross was able to pay the Cherokee Nation's legal bill. So basically, the United States government used strong-arm tactics and reneged on their own treaties to force the Cherokee to sign. That ain't right, and that ain't constitutional.
While the other set they took on the name as the Eastern Band, settled in comfortably to North Carolina. Ain't that something?
Mm-hmm. In a meeting in May 1832, Supreme Court Justice John McLean spoke with the Cherokee delegation to offer his views on the situation. McLean's advice was to remove and become a territory with a patented fee simple to the nation for all its lands and a delegation in Congress, but reserving itself the entire right of legislation and selection of all officers. He agreed to send Ross, letting explain his views. Ross was furious, believing that this was a form of treachery. McLean's advice precipitated a split with the Cherokee leadership as John Ridge and Elias Benoit began to doubt Ross's leadership. John Ridge introduced a resolution at the National Council meeting in October 1832 to send delegations to Washington to discuss removal treaty with President Jackson. The council rejected Ridge's proposal and instead selected Joseph Van, John Bridges, Richard Taylor, and John Ross to represent the Cherokee. February 1833, Ridge wrote Ross advocating that the delegation dispatched to Washington that month would begin removal negotiations with Jackson. Ridge and Ross did not have irreconcilable worldviews. Neither believed that the Cherokee could fend off Georgia's usurpation of Cherokee land. However, Ridge was furious that Ross had refused to consider Jackson's offer to pay the Cherokee $3 million for all their lands in Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee. In this environment, Ross led a delegation to Washington in March 1834 to try to negotiate alternatives to removal. Ross made several proposals. However, the Cherokee Nation may not have approved any of Ross's plans, nor was the reasonable expectation that Jackson would settle for any agreement short of removal. These offers, coupled with a lengthy cross-continental trip, indicated that Ross's strategy was to prolong the negotiations on removal indefinitely. There was possibility that the next president might be more favorably inclined. Free said they did, but they also strategically passed laws and decrees to advance justify their impromptu lawmaking. Example, the Papal Bull. Yeah. It also goes on to say that Ross's strategy was flawed because it was susceptible to the United States making a treaty with a minority faction. On May 29, 1834, Ross received word from John H. Eaton that a new delegation including Major Ridge, John Ridge, Elias Bedoin, and Ross' younger brother Andrew, collectively called the Ridge Party, or Treaty Party, had arrived in Washington with the goal of signing a treaty of removal. The two sides attempted reconciliation, but by October 1834 still had not come to any agreement. In January 1835, the factions were again in Washington, pressured by the presence of the Ridge Party. Ross agreed on February 25, 1835, to exchange all Cherokee land east of the Mississippi for land west of the Mississippi and $20 million. He made it contingent on the General Council's accepting the terms. So it went from a $200,000 offer to $20 million. That's probably why to this day the Cherokee Nation is one of the wealthiest tribes in existence. As you figure $20 million in 1835, that's a lot of money. Even now.
Mm-hmm. The equivalent be a couple of billion now.
So the Treaty of New Echota and Trail of Tears. Secretary of War Lewis Cass believed this was yet another ploy to delay action and removal for an additional year, and threatened to sign the treaty with John Ridge on December 29, 1835. The treaty party signed the Treaty of New Echota with the U.S. Most Cherokee thought the signatories unauthorized. However, Ross could not stop its enforcement. Under the orders from President Martin Van Buren, General Winfield Scott, and 7,000 federal troops forced removal of Cherokee who did not immigrate to the Indian Territory by 1838. This forced removal came to be known as the Trail of Tears. Except in defeat, Ross convinced General Scott to allow him to supervise much of the removal process. So there were basically 2 to 3 immigrations, and the last one was a forced immigration, which they call the Trail of Tears. Okay, that makes sense. Returning to his home at Head of Coosa late at night, Ross saw a man he did not recognize at his house. He told the man to feed his horse and put him away for the night. Instead, the stranger followed him to the door, identified himself as Stephen Carter, and told Ross that he now owned the property and had papers to prove it. Ross then learned agents of Georgia had given Carter possession of the house early in the week. After evicting his family, disposed by Georgia and Carter, Ross was now homeless. The next day, Ross found the family members had given his wife Quate refuge. Quate was among the many Cherokee who died en route. according to one of the soldiers escorting the group. She had given her coat to a child that was crying because of the cold. A few days later, she died of pneumonia near the Little Rock on the Arkansas River. Because selling common lands was a capital crime under Cherokee law, treaty opponents assassinated Benoit, Major Ridge, and John Ridge after the migration to the Indian Territory. Stan Waite, Benoit's brother, was also attacked, but he survived. The assassins were never publicly identified nor tried in court. General Matthew Arbuckle, commander of Fort Gibson, claimed he knew their identities but never tried to arrest them. Some Cherokee, particularly those tied to the pro-treaty party, claimed that Chief John Ross knew about the assassinations beforehand. Many years later, Chief Ross' son Allen wrote that this was not so. Allen's letter is said to be in possession of the Oklahoma State Historical Society. Afterward, there were years of violence between the two factions. Given the controversy of the struggle over territory and Ross's personal wealth, a vocal minority of Cherokee and a generation of political leaders in Washington considered Ross to be dictatorial, greedy, and aristocratic leader who sought to defraud the Cherokee Nation. Ross also had influential supporters in Washington, including Thomas L. McKinney and the Commissioner of Indian Affairs. He described Ross as the father of the Cherokee Nation, a Moses who led his people into their exodus from the land of their nativity to a new country and from the savage state of that civilization.
You see what David Corey said. So he didn't have HUD. That's what TJ said. So the jackets got jacked.
Yeah, this is stories about betrayal at the highest level in multiple facets.
Mm-hmm.
Says John Ross is... Go ahead, Bones.
Oh, it's like they tried to negotiate a deal and they got screwed.
Yep. Don't trust the government. John Ross is introduced to the Sharpley Stapler family in Brandywine Springs, Delaware by Thomas McKinney in 1841. Ross had many common interests with John Stapler, a merchant and widower. His eldest daughter Sarah cared for her younger siblings and befriended Ross. However, her younger sister Mary Brown Stapler developed a real love for Ross and initiated a romantic attachment in May 1844. As the time came for Ross to return to the Indian Territory, their mutual love ripened. They married in Philadelphia on September 2nd, 1844. And this is sad. The American Civil War. The Civil War divided the Cherokee people. At first, the majority supported the Confederacy, which protected their slave holdings. Fearing that joining the Confederacy would void the earlier Cherokee treaties with the United States, Ross tried to persuade his people to remain neutral in the conflict. But eventually, most chose sides. Full-bloods tended to favor maintaining relationships with the United States. The group included over 2,000 members of the Traditionalist and Abolitionist Society. The Keetoowah Society. Members of this group were called Penns by non-members because they wore an emblem of cross pins on their shirts. Ross advocated that the Cherokee Nation remain neutral. It was a losing argument. At a General Assembly on August 21, 1861, Ross ended his speech by announcing that in the interest of tribal and inter-Indian unity, it was time to agree on an alliance with the Confederate States of America. Many of the well-armed mixed bloods, especially the wealthy, led by Stan Waite, supported the Confederacy. Traditionalists and Cherokee who opposed the institution of slavery remained loyal to the Union. However, the majority of the Cherokee may not have understood the nature of the new treaty. L.J. Free says Exodus equals exit us from the trail, position back to the head. After Ross departed to meet with President Lincoln in Washington, traditionalist Cherokee helped maneuver the selection of Ross's supporter Thomas Page as acting principal chief. Three or four of Ross's own sons fought for the Union. However, Ross' nephew by marriage, John Drew, had organized and served as colonel of the 1st Cherokee Mountain Rifles and Confederate Army. Most of Drew's regiment would later twice desert rather than follow Confederate orders to kill other Indians. Many leaders of the northern faction, still led by Ross, went to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, for the duration of the war.
Hold up, this is the Civil War, right?
Yeah,
They talking about having Indians kill other Indians in the Civil War. It's kind of funny they teach you the Civil War is about something else.
that's true.
So how they say again, who was fighting who?
Well, like you said, wars are fought by proxy. In 1863, the flight of many Cherokee voters to refuge in Kansas and Texas provided the pro-Confederate Treaty Party an opportunity to elect Stan Wade as principal chief without them. Pro-Union National Council members declared the election invalid. Wade, that failed, raided Ross's home, Ross Cottage. The home was looted and burned. Ross lost all of his belongings. Ross's daughter Jane and her husband, Andrew Nave, were living in Ross's cottage at the time. Nave was shot and killed. Only the prior intervention of Wade's wife seems to have prevented the killing of additional Ross relatives. Ross's oldest son, James, who had gone to Park Hill searching for supplies, was captured and sent to prison in the Confederacy where he died. Ross remained in exile. However, within a week of the burning, the National Council convened and restored Ross as principal chief. David Corey says, "You fighting you." Hint, cowboys and Indians. Yep, that's pretty much it. Ross took his wife Mary and the children to Philadelphia so he could see her family. Ross returned to Washington where he had inconclusive meetings with President Lincoln and other supporters. When he returned for Mary in 1865, he found her gravely ill with what was diagnosed as lung congestion, likely tuberculosis. She could not travel, so he remained with her for more than a month. Mary died of her illness on July 20th, 1865. She was buried in her native Delaware. Ross returned to Indian Territory after her funeral. After the war, the two factions of the Cherokee tried to negotiate separately with the U.S. government Southern Treaty Commission. The Commissioner of Indian Affairs, Dennis L. Cooley, was persuaded to believe allegations by Stan Wade and Elias Cornelius Benoit that Ross was a dictator who did not truly represent the Cherokee people. Even though his health was worsening, Ross left Park Hill, where he was staying with his niece, on November 9, 1865, to meet the President Andrew Johnson. Johnson introduced Cooley to reopen the negotiations with Cherokee and to meet only with the pro-Union faction, headed by John Ross. Ross died on August 1, 1866, in Washington, D.C., while still negotiating a final treaty with the federal government. However, Ross had by then persuaded Johnson to reject a particularly harsh treaty version favored by Cooley. So then it goes on to talk about death and legacy. Initially, Ross was buried beside his second wife, Mary, in Washington, Delaware. A few months later, the Cherokee Nation returned his remains to the Ross Cemetery at Park Hill, Indian Territory, now Cherokee Country, Oklahoma, for interment. John Ross's great-great-granddaughter, Mary G. Ross, was the first Native American female engineer. She helped propel the world into an era of space travel while becoming of one of the nation's most prominent women scientists on space age. The city of Chattanooga named the Market Street Bridge in Ross's honor, and a bust of Ross stands on the north side of the Hamilton County Courthouse lawn. The city of Rossville, Georgia, located just south of Tallahassee, Tennessee state line, is named for Ross. Contains his former home and John Ross House, where he lived from 1830 to 1838 until the state seized his lands near the Coosa River, one of the oldest surviving homes in the Chattanooga area. It has been designated a National Historic Landmark. The city Park Hill, Oklahoma, hosts a John Ross Museum in the former schoolhouse located west of Ross Cemetery. National Public Radio correspondent Steve Inskeep suggested that the U.S. $20 bill be modified to carry images of both Ross and Andrew Jackson, illustrating our democratic experience. It says, John Ross was portrayed by Johnny Cash in an episode of Net Playhouse titled The Trail of Tears in 1971. John Ross' life and The Trail of Tears are dramatized in episodes 3 of the Rick Burns American Experience documentary We Shall Remain, shown and available online on PBS.
It's Ross. Betsy Lou Ross is his descendant.
Tim, are you able to get a screenshot or some kind of, could you save that documentary that was just referenced, please?
Wait, you talking about what I just read?
The last thing you just read about the documentary, could you save that for me, please? I'm driving out. I'm not able to save it.
Okay. That would be at a name 6. I'll put in the chat. And that's the story of Chief John Ross. I mean, the way you look at it, the tribes were doomed because even after they moved them to Oklahoma, as you know, because of the gold, Oklahoma was sitting on liquid gold, which was oil, and they ended up taking that land from them. So the United States government had no intentions on honoring the treaties. Interesting and sad simultaneously. All right. So I put it in a back chat. So at the end of the day, you had an individual who meant well, but the government tricked everybody. Yes. Trying to get back to the chat. Oh, crazy. So, Bones, what's your thought about Cherokee Chief John Ross?
Looking at it, it shows why and how the Cherokee look, how they look today. It shows how they got into the positions that they got into. It's just crazy. I think you couldn't make this up if you tried. But then it goes back to what we said before, because what they said about him, his mother and his grandmother were considered half-breeds. Half Scottish, half Cherokee.
Right.
And it goes back to the story that remembering that you had the French over here for at least 200 years dealing with Indians, intermarrying.
Before the English even came over here. Grand Rise of Smoking Big 06.
Grand Rise in peace. Just mind blowing.
Yeah, it is. The interesting thing now is that we have an opportunity to correct and right these wrongs from both sides and both perspectives. Again, we would love to get Cherokee's take on this treaty and on Chief John Ross and how everything transpired between the East Band, the West Band, and the Trail of Tears. Because like you said, there are a lot of holes in the story. So as of right now, this is what we have to go on.
Yeah, because it seems like how we started reading about it, we know that the Cherokee split up in different ways. Some went to Texas, some Arkansas, Tennessee, some stayed in Carolina, some went in Georgia. And if you read it, you see at particular times, the ones that stayed, they turned them into U.S. citizens over time. And then looking at the years, we're in the 1860s. We know 1865 was the Emancipation Proclamation. Could that be part of that deal in them negotiations that they were doing?
I would think so.
Because if you read the Emancipation Proclamation and you really understand it, it didn't free anybody. All it did was just turn the Indians that were left in particular states into citizens. And that's the one thing that they was having an uproar about when you read a lot of the articles from 1865, that our ancestors were mad. They were protesting about it.
Now, so too, those poor Cherokees, I suspect, were the ones that ended up becoming, that were ones that being considered slaves.
That would make sense why they would make sure the mechanisms known as Section HUD 3 and rural grants and stuff. Because didn't it say that money that was left for the poor Cherokees end up becoming part of the national?
Yeah.
I wonder what the government was doing with that money. Sound like investments to me.
Tego asks and says, "Are you guys of Cherokee descent?" Tego, I'm Catawba Sapani.
I have one line that tracks back to the Cherokee in my family.
Yeah. So there are some of us who have Cherokee lineage. And there are some of us that are reaching out to certain Cherokee tribes to see if they would, honor their ancestors. If not, we'll have to deal with that. Now, when you say from what area, who you talking to?
Yeah, my relatives is that trace back to the Cherokee reservation at that time is Eleanor Babson, and we tracked up right back to the Cherokee reservation.
And my ancestors go back to the Catawba Sapani out in Wayne County on my mother's side and Caswell County on my father's side. The tribe that I'm officially a part of are the Catawba Sapani of Ohio. That's where they're headquartered at.
So,
Tego, I didn't answer because I haven't finished my genealogy, which you are a part of. So if you can help me out. So yeah, I don't have a tribe yet. I haven't found a line connecting anywhere yet, but I'm not done with my genealogy. By the way, fellas, that's my big cousin down there in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Yeah, by doing your genealogy, some people find out that you have relatives that tie back into multiple different tribes. So far in mine, I have 3 tribes my family tied back into. And he asked what the goal is. Well, here at the Auchtoctones Assembly, our main goal is to bring awareness to the American Indian by helping them find their tribe through genealogy, tying you back into your tribe, and therefore helping you and your tribe become self-sufficient with mechanisms and resources that were left into play by our ancestors.
So that's it in a nutshell, and that's a plan. And what we're not here to do is tell people who they are. We're not here to tell you who you are. We're not here to tell you who you are not. We're not here to tell you who you associate with. We're just here to help those that want to tie into their tribes and become self-sufficient. Period, point blank in the discussion. And we are, Auchtoctones Assembly is a non-profit, tax-exempt 501c3. And we are working with people in the chat and also in our community to get the organizations up and running and be able to acquire the resources and the funds to become self-sufficient. And the mechanisms that we're using are the nonprofits themselves and the HUD Section 3 and the USDA grants, along with some other mechanisms that are in place that were put here for us. So hopefully that answers your question.
And also on the thing of genealogy with tribes, when you find multiple tribes that's in your line, you do have a choice on which ones you want to be a part of. That's why, again, it's very important to do your research. You find the tribes, you know, find out what they're about, find out as much information as you can before you start making the decisions. So you're aware of what you're going into before.
And you can always schedule an appointment to meet them face to face, as opposed to calling them. Face to face meetings are always better, because I prefer to look somebody in the eye when I talk to them. Because anybody can say anything over the phone. So that's just me. I know not everybody has the time to do that, but I would encourage you to do it as much as possible, because we make time for things that are important. It's always been my observation. So there are over 573 nationally recognized tribes. There are over 1,000 state recognized tribes, and there are many thousands of locally recognized tribes. So if someone tells you there are no tribes here and there are no melanated tribes, they are lying. It says, my great-great-grandfather was known as the medicine man in Mississippi, a Cherokee Indian. That's awesome. Well, if you go to Auchtoctonesassembly.com and look under the 50 free services to help you track your genealogy, if you haven't already started, that'll be a good place to start to get the resources to do your genealogy, to find out which tribe or which band your great-great-grandfather was from, or your three-time great-grandfather was from. Because what we're finding is that some of the Cherokee are actually Catawba, or at that particular time, Tutelo. So just depends on where you were located and where they migrated from, and when the split took place.
And what they settled after, and what names they took on and tribes they identified with after, especially with all this moving around and breaking up.
Yeah, because the East had a great split in the early 1700s at Fort Christiana, right after the Tuscarora War, when you had, I guess for lack of better terms, the East decided to stay here, and then you had the East that decided to go with the Haudenosaunee and take on their ways and their language, Dakota. So it just depends. As you do your research, you'll find.
And it depends on who was telling the story of the tribe, because a lot of them are the same, but depends on if the French are talking about them, the English are talking about them, The Americans are talking about them, the Spanish, or even other sets of Indians call people by different names. And that's where a lot of confusion come in, like we was talking yesterday. A lot of people confuse a lot of the bands as the actual tribes, and they were just really smaller bands of bigger tribes. That's why it also pays to know your history for yourself. Start meeting some of your tribal members just to get the history down.
And Doodle Vision says some of the Cherokee are Chickasaw, which are actually Echota. And he said Cherokee is a mixture of various tribes. And Copper Color Queen said that's what I was referring to yesterday with my 3 times great grandfather. So yeah, you'll find as you do your genealogy and actually go talk to some of these tribes that there's a lot of rich history, both written and oral, that needs to be discovered and rediscovered. Cliff says, I have Cree, Cherokee, mixed relatives, so you're correct, Division. That's good to hear that you guys are actually doing your genealogy and found out so much information. Again, we have to do a get your information so we can do a community spotlight on all those that are finding out information about their tribes, because what it will do is it will help everybody else who's searching and who are not as successful as you are, because sometimes we need encouragement, and encouragement doesn't always just have to come from people that are always speaking on the chats, or on the panels. Some of the greatest encouragement comes from the people in the chat that make up these platforms, because without you there is no us. So make sure you send us your email address so we can start doing community spotlights on it, or anybody in your community that's working to empower and better their community, their families, and their tribes. Anything you want to add, Bones?
No, just see what Tago W's was like, especially from the African side. That's cool. I mean, if you do your genealogy and you tie back to Africa, we got no gripes with that. And like we say all the time, if you find your African tribe and we can help you with that, we're here to help. Like we say again, we're not here to tell you who you are and who you're not. We just here to help with people who want to know, who want to do genealogy, who want to access these mechanisms and resources to become self-sufficient.
Facts.
So at the end of the day, what you tie back to, here at Auchtoctones Assembly, we don't hold that against you, because who you are is who you are. None of us had a choice. Unless somebody know of an application that before you was conceived that was sent out and you chose who you was going to be born to, what land, what you'd be identifying with. So at the end of the day, over here, that really doesn't matter. If you're trying to do the work, you're trying to uplift your community, you're doing the best that you can to fix these situations that we're suffering from, then hey, let's get this work done.
Facts. Yeah, Macadon one says, I still have a lot of work to do. A lot of us have a lot of work to do. Even the ones who found their tribes are still doing, their genealogy. So don't stop.
Exactly.
Do not stop. We all got that work to do. So
anybody got any closing remarks before we close this out and get to work?
I just said something.
Yeah, I know.
Any questions, comments, concerns, gripes, smoke, beef, whatever you want to call it, email us at auchtoctonesassembly@gmail.com. It's in the chat.
And also remember, we had a free 50 free genealogy websites to help you with the genealogy. And also up under that is broken down for all the genealogy resources that's in every state. And as well, if you have questions on what to do when you get stuck, or you can't find relatives, or you're trying to find American Indian relatives, we also had that information posted up on our Auchtoctones Assembly YouTube page as well.
Let's see. Mr. TJ says matriarch or patriarch or both. What's the best route? Mr. TJ, you start with whatever is easiest for you to navigate, whichever one gives you the most information, so you can take your ancestry at least back to the mid 1800s before the Emancipation Proclamation.
Remember,
That's
your
why I say
father
start.
line had a mother too, who had a mother, who had a mother, who had a mother. Let's not forget.
Yeah. So unless you are, and there's nothing wrong with this, so unless you are of parents, if both of your parents are not melanated, or what is classified as African American or black, then you are definitely qualified for both sides. Remember, the matrilineal side of the house was important for those who were not from here. If you were a European and you were trying to tie in, then you would, marry into a tribe. You married to a woman's tribe that was in control of who would be the king, who would be the chiefs. Well, if you were already Indian, then you're Indian on both sides, so it really doesn't matter. But if you're, if you come from a mixed family, meaning one of your parents is European or what have you, or not, or non, I guess for lack of better terms, indigenous, then you would definitely have to be looking at your maternal side. Hopefully that helps and didn't confuse you even more. All right, so Bones, check us out of here, boss.
Like we always say, it's fun when we kick it with the relatives. No place we'd rather be right now. And until the next Rising show, peace.
Peace, y'all.